Close your eyes. And picture your favourite film. Now take away the music. They are the emotional core of storytelling, shaping how we feel, how we remember, and how we experience cinema itself.
Just that progression of story through music and soundscape.
The connection of the visuals and the music are making you feel tense or relaxed.
If you can fill every speaker with the sound of the orchestra, then you will get feeling that you are inside the orchestra.
And makes the difference between a scene we watch and a scene we feel. A film's setting is more than just a backdrop. It's a character in itself. Whether it's the misty mountains of Middle-earth, the endless dunes of Arrakis, or the cold, sterile corridors of a spaceship drifting through deep space. The locations of these stories not only shapes the visuals, but the music that brings them to life. For composers, these landscapes aren't just scenery, they are sources of inspiration. The sweeping rolling hills of New Zealand, standing in for Middle-earth, gave Howard Shore a canvas for the grand yet deeply personal themes of The Lord of the Rings.
So when Peter Jackson approached the crew and cast, he wanted people to go into this world and think that it's history and we're archaeologists and we're digging up facts from Rohan and what would they look like if they were real. And I know that for Howard Shore, he saw them more as an Anglo-Saxon civilization, and he drew from instruments that were used then and that kind of light, medieval jingle that he puts into them using like the French horns. And then you've got like the Shire, which were sort of your more Somerset and kind of Irish and Celtic side, which was like these songs, these jingles that were taken from the books. Like they would move around and settle a lot, but now they've come and they're in the Shire and they sing these songs, and it gives this depth of history. I think as well, taking parts of Tolkien's words, whether it's Into the West or even Aragorn's crowning song, he's able to kind of put in these subtle bits of background music that really elevates Tolkien's words. So Aragorn talking about coming from Numenor with his forebears kind of gives this little sort of like a little cradle to the words and lifts it up.
The rich Celtic-inspired melodies of the Shire evoke its pastoral beauty, while the towering peaks and the vast expanses of Rohan and Gondor translate in the bold brass fanfares and solemn choral harmonies. Every location breathes through Shore's music, creating music that's endless and enduring as the world itself.
It's almost like folklore, right? So every civilization, every group of people or animals or creatures, they have their own history. And when we came to Middle-earth, they were developed on their songs and the culture was built from that and these motifs. So you've got Rohan, you've got kind of the violin, the French horn, and then you have the Hobbit, you have more of a flute. And these motifs throughout not only develop like themselves, but you can hear like the broken, when the Fellowship break up, the score breaks up. And then you have intertwined bits with Gondor, the Gondor motifs, and it just kind of helps. You know, you could probably listen to the score without watching the film and have the whole story in your head alone.
Hans Zimmer took a different approach for Dune, letting the unforgivable deserts of Jordan and Abu Dhabi shape his sonic landscapes. Rather than relying on traditional orchestration, Zimmer and his team built an entirely new musical language, one that mirrored the vast, alien beauty of Arrakis. The heavy use of throat singing, unconventional percussion, and distorted electronic textures mirrors the raw, elemental force of the desert, making the score feel as otherworldly as the setting itself. And then there's Alien, a film where isolation and fear are amplified by its sound. While it was filmed on sound stages, its visual language is cold, industrial, and hauntingly vast, which Jerry Goldsmith translated into a scene that oscillates between eerie minimalism and moments of sheer terror. Goldsmith originally envisaged a more traditional sweeping score, but Ridley Scott pushed for something more unsettling. Music that made the spaceship Nostromo feel like a lonely, decaying world of its own. The result? A score that feels as unsettling and suffocating as the film itself. Long before the first film was composed, music was already shaping the way we tell stories. Classical music, with its sweeping orchestration, intricate harmonies, and emotional depth, laid the foundation for the modern film score. The great composers of cinema, John Williams, Howard Shore, Hans Zimmer, Jerry Goldsmith, stand on the shoulders of the masters, Wagner, Holst, Stravinsky, Mahler, and beyond. Take Star Wars, for instance. John Williams didn't just compose a score, he resurrected a tradition. Drawing from Richard Wagner's concept of the leitmotif, where distinct musical themes are aligned to characters and ideas, Williams created one of the most iconic soundtracks in history. The bold, brassy march of the main theme, the ominous foreboding strains of the Imperial March, the tender, romantic swells of Leia's theme, each one a direct descendant of the great operatic and the symphonic traditions of the 19th and early 20th centuries. Howard Shore's Lord of the Rings score follows a similar lineage. His sweeping orchestration echoes the grandiosity of Gustav Mahler, the choral intensity of Carl Orff's Carmina Burana, and the rich modal harmonies of early European folk music. The music of the Shire, with its lifting melodies and warm string arrangement, evokes the rustic charm of English pastoral composers like Vaughan Williams. Meanwhile, the battle sequences, thunderous percussion, bold brass, and choral chants carry the weight and power of a Wagnerian opera. Shaw wasn't just scoring a film, he was scoring an epic mythology, using the full breadth of classical tradition to give Middle-earth a musical identity as rich and deep as its history.
At the core, it's like folklore and mythology. Like Tolkien wanted to create a mythology for him and for us. In those mythologies and folklores, there's always core themes, and those themes become, like, whether it's love, it's courage, you have this folklore, you have each character having their own kind of theme and motif that gets built upon. It's breaking down both stories musically and then building them back up with their own characters. Like, characters have their own songs and almost like their own scores throughout.
Often what people don't necessarily notice, the horses are a good example. If they're running across screen, then we'll be using what we call panning to move the position between our left and right speakers. The horses are here, the audio is following the movement of everything. Because we've got space from left to right to play with, having things move that way. If there's a sword fight happening over here, then maybe the sounds of the swords are more focused over here and the horses run by. So we can create space just by placement of the sound. When the score comes in as well, then it's, music is sitting in different frequencies to Foley, the sound effects. So the chinking of metal is not really going to get in the way of strings or drums so much because it's such a non-musical sound.
Obviously, third and score is very broken, and it's sort of, it's not strong, more just like solo instruments that build and build, but they never quite get to that point. And it's the same for Gondor, because obviously the steward, he's basically sick, and the whole Gondor motifs that we first hear when we see Boromir at the Council of Elrond, that in the background, that always stays very subtle and broken. But then we get the beacons. He lights the beacons, and it transitions from this swell of the Gondor themes and motifs that transition as they go across, that then trickles into the Rohirrim theme when Aragorn and Gondor calls for aid. And then when they ride to battle, these two scores then just meet in the middle, and it becomes this, like, it reflects the idea of the world of men are not falling anymore, although they are together again, and we're going to fight the powers of evil together.
But classical influence isn't always about grandeur. Jerry Goldsmith's Alien score takes a cue from modernist composers like György Ligeti and Krzysztof Penderecki, whose avant-garde, atonal compositions shattered traditional notions of harmony and melody. In Alien, silence and dissonance become just as powerful as sweeping orchestration. Goldsmith manipulates orchestral textures, using unsettling string glissandos, piercing brass clusters, and eerie creeping woodwinds to create an atmosphere of pure dread. It's a soundtrack that doesn't just accompany the film, it crawls under your skin, much like the creature lurking in the shadows. Even Hans Zimmer, known for revolutionising film scoring with his fusion of electronic and orchestral elements, owes much to the classical tradition. His work on Dune might seem far removed from the Romantic era symphonies of the past, but its core is built on the same principles, building tension through harmonic progression, creating motifs that define characters, and using instrumentation to shape emotion. His use of massive choral arrangements and deep resonant brass harks back to the power of Holst's The Planets, while his innovative sound design echoes the experimental spirit of 20th century composers like John Cage.
There's like the mood of it changes as it goes along, and you're trying to cram everything in. And that's when the balance of the instrumentation is the most important thing, because if you listen to the piano on its own, I'll be sitting there going, oh, the piano's really, that's not really, a bit underwhelming, it's not very exciting, a bit kind of bloodless. So then you spend a bit of time getting the piano, getting some highs in the piano, exciting the bass end, getting the middle, like pumping, like ramping everything up in the piano, and then you put it in the track and you think, oh, well, now it's interfering with the low end of the woodwinds, the bassoon, and then it's interfering with the cellos as well, and then the top end of the piano is interfering with other things. It's just like, well, okay, I need to take off all that fancy nonsense I put on it and just put it at a level. So that's when put it at a level that's going to work with everything else, because it's got to work together. Because there's orchestral moments where you'll favour the orchestra on the bigger widescreen shots, and then there's percussion breaks, so you kind of favour that. So it's getting the balance of those things right, not having everything sound huge all the time. You have to kind of pick what's the most important thing, and it's usually the melody.
The influence of classical music on film scores is not just a nod to the past, it's a bridge between centuries of storytelling. The same techniques that moved audiences in concert halls now move us in cinemas. Whether through the soaring orchestral themes of Star Wars and The Lord of the Rings, the avant-garde horror of Alien, or the bold experimental landscapes of Dune, film composers continue to draw from the well of classical tradition, proving that great music, like great stories, transcends time.
If you're at Abbey Road or Air, or even around Europe, Prague or Budapest, there's a set mic array which you usually start with, so then that will reflect the sound of the orchestra in the room, and that's always a good basis to start from. And obviously you add spot mics around the sections, so if you want some more strings, you've got a bunch of mics with just strings, and obviously woodwinds and brass and percussion. With Alien Romulus, Ben Wolfish, who wrote the score, he was quite eager to have a mic array which would represent the Atmos speaker setup. So then you'd have LCR, side surrounds, then rear surrounds, then 4 ceiling mics, and the low frequency sub speaker. You have a mic or several mics that you send straight to, well, this is what we used to do anyway. So you'd have like left, centre, right tree mics, and then either side of the orchestra you'd have side microphones, maybe 1 or 2, or definitely one each side, maybe 2 or 3 each side. And then you'd have surround mics, so then you send those mics straight to those speakers to give you that immersive Atmos sound. If you can fill every speaker with the sound of the orchestra, then you will get a feeling that you are inside the orchestra, or in the orchestra within it.
I think with any piece of music, the mix is really important, because the arrangement and the sound choice. So in scores, if it's strings, brass, big percussion to make things like big and dramatic and like set the tempo, set the pace of that scene, those sounds on their own that have been recorded through microphones will need some help to work together. Mixing is about getting all the instruments to live well together, but also to make things expansive or make things deeper, and whether something's like very much in your face and quite intense, or whether it sits further away. You might have big timpani drums that are right up at the front that are going doo 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 doo, and then you've got strings sat behind that that kind of give that space to the music, and maybe the strings start to come out more and it just raises that tension.
Most films, there'll be a moment where you want to hear the score big, loud and proud, and there'll be moments where when they just shove the faders to the top, because there is a bit in Romulus where the main characters go up in a transporter, and the main character sees a sun for the first time in her life, and they come above the clouds, and the sun emerges out of the kind of cloud and gloom, the kind of obsidian gloom of this grisly planet. And so then Ben's score was fantastic, huge sweeping melody, massive orchestra. I think it was Abbey Road who did that, and that's when you're going, oh yeah, let's go. Ben called them the discovery cues, where they would be padding around the station figuring out, turning everything on, and like there's no one's being ripped apart at this point, and they're just discovering the station, what's happened, can we turn these bits of equipment on to get the oxygen going, and so they're discovering. So then there's those little flute figures, little woodwind figures that Ben and Vedi Alvarez, the director, they kind of borrowed, if you like, from the first Alien film, which was Jerry Goldsmith, and there'd be like those little flute flurries that would point out little moments of, oh, what's that over there? But then Ben wanted them to kind of bounce around the cinema, so we had like delays that would do that. That was really good fun, because they'd have the little moment, and then they would appear over there, and then over there, and then out the back.
It's like massaging everything into the right place at the right time, because music makes you feel something. So if those drums are big and in your face, it makes you feel like, whoa, this is powerful. The connection of the visuals and the music are making you feel tense or relaxed or edgy or whatever it might be.
Lord of the Rings is like a family tradition for us. I mean, when we turn 21, we all get the one ring. I got mine for my 21st from New Zealand, and I always thought it was because you're turning 21, but it turns out it was actually my grandparents' last film they went to see with the family, so it's quite comforting for me. It was what made me weird in school, so now it generally is a real passion of mine, and I have all the information. I don't feel like I have to be anyone who I'm not. I just found immersing myself into such beautiful mythology that I felt more me, and I felt I could draw creative inspiration from it as well, so it means a lot to me.
Every note we hear in The Lord of the Rings, Dune, Star Wars, and Alien woven into the fabric of our memories, echoing in our hearts long after the screen fades to black. Because in the end, the greatest film scores don't just accompany the story. They are the story.